Okay, I'm going to install bvcms on this Windows 10 clean operating system right here, brand new installation, and show you how it goes. First thing I need to do is go to the GitHub repository for bvcms. Here it is down here. And this is where the README file down at the bottom of this page is, this quick start. And I want to be able to get back to this page a couple of times because there'll be a reboot or two involved, and I want to be sure I have that. So I'm going to click asterisk to store that in here, so I'll be able to get back to it on this browser. But the first thing this thing says do is to install development tools and required libraries. 1, 2, Visual Studio and SQL Server is what we're going to install. So Visual Studio Community 2017. That's this one right here. We click free download, and that's going to begin downloading the file to this Windows machine. I click run to accept that. And here we go. It wants to know, do I want to allow this app to make changes? Say yes. Visual Studio installer, continue. All right, now it's pulling down the installer, not the actual Visual Studio itself, but the installer, which will further download files once it's started. So we'll wait on this for a second or two. I'm going to pause. I'll be right back when it's done. So the installer is almost done, and we'll wait for that to finish up here. All right, now the installer comes up, and we need to pick what workload we're working with. So we're building web applications, ASP.NET web development applications. So I'm going to check that box. That's the only one of all these that I need. You can install whatever you want on here, but that's the one we need to get started with. So here's another place where, well, we have to answer this. So don't show this message again, and click close. All right, so this is going to go through this is where it's actually installing Visual Studio itself. And this takes more time than it did the last time. Actually, it only took a second, didn't it? But anyway, it took about a minute before. Now it's going to take about 5 or 10 minutes to do. So I'm going to hit pause again, and I'll see you on the other side once this is done. Okay, folks, it's not done yet, but I wanted to tell you that I'm sitting in a hotel room, and I have a very slow internet connection, 4 megabytes a second. And so that's why it's taken so long for me. It's already been about 3 or 4 minutes. So I'm going to pause again and see when I'm done. Okay, it's been running for about 8 or 9 minutes. It's finishing up now. Downloaded is 100% and finishing up says 100%, but I guess we got a little bit left to go before it takes us to the next screen. Okay, so it worked, and here is the Visual Studio coming in. So I'm going to say don't sign into Visual Studio right now. I mean, I've got an account, but you don't have to have one. And I'll start Visual Studio. And this is going to prepare for the first use. And again, this takes, well, it didn't take that long. All right, so the next thing is to install Visual Studio. So I'm going to go to, do we still have the browser? Yeah. So I'm going to back up to the GitHub thing. So here's the Developer Start Guide, and SQL Server Express 2016 is what we want next. So that's just an advertisement there. We want to download SQL Server 2016 Service Pack 1 Express. And run that. Say yes. And choose the basic installation. That's all you need. And agree to the terms of the license. Install. And I think we have to choose a few other options in here. So this is downloaded the install package, not the actual SQL Server yet. So this is, the installer is going to do all that. So several step process to get in there. A computer restart is required. Please restart your computer and try the basic installation again. Okay, never mind. I'll do that. And when I get back to this point, I'll let you know. That didn't take long at all, less than a minute to do that. So I'm going to bring up my browser again and go to my favorites, and there's the GitHub right there. Scroll down. Gotta get out of that. And here's the quick start guide, and so we need to get going with the SQL Server Express 2016 again. And I don't know where, maybe it's in my downloads folder, but I'm just going to download it again and see what happens here. All right, so run it. Say yes. Basic. Accept. Install. And again, the installation package is what's being loaded now. All right, now it's going to setup files for the install package. And it'll ask us for a couple of options to choose here, and I forget what they are. I'm going to hit pause, and when it comes back, I'll let you know. Okay, it says download successful. Now it's installing those setup files, and we'll see how long that takes. Extracting them, I guess it's doing that. I'll hit pause. Okay, that actually took longer than Visual Studio, but here it is, done. This is the next screen you get after it finishes. And the instance name is SQL Express. We'll need to remember that. I'm the administrator on the machine. It picked all these things by default, so all these locations should be fine by default on your machine. You may want to install SQL Server Management Studio. It's not absolutely necessary, but it does give you some tools to use where you can do your own queries and stuff like that. So I'm going to hit close and say that's fine, all that. And are you sure you want to exit? Yes. So on the we've done that. So I'm going to go back to my favorites, GitHub, and we've installed Visual Studio and SQL Server Express 2016, Visual Studio Community 2017, SQL Server Express 2016. Get the cloning URL for the bvcms source code repository. Now we're on that page right now, so we're going to click this green clone or download button in the upper right part of the page and copy that link. So right here is the this green button, clone or download. So click that, and this is the link that it wanted me to copy. So copy to clipboard button right there. That's done. And so now I start up Visual Studio, and recently added files. I'll expand that out. Visual Studio is one of the first ones I installed. So it comes up, and we want to go to Team Explorer and click clone right here, local Git repositories clone. And this is where I put that URL that I copied. So there it is. I click clone. And now this is going to pull down all the source code from GitHub. And again, I'll hit pause and come back when it's done. All right, looks like it's almost done. And there it is. All right, so now this is all of the projects and solutions in the BVCMS repository. So this is the root of the directory. We really want to go to CMS Web, but there is a link right here, cmsweb.solution. That's what you want, cmsweb.sln. So I'm going to double click that, and that's going to open that particular project for the website. So here it is, and if we go back to the instructions down here, we'll look at the next step. Go back to the left here. It says load the project on the right side. Click tab Team Explorer. We did that. Under local Git repositories, click clone. We did that. We pasted that URL. back on the solution, double click CMS web solution item. That's what we just did. So we've done like 5 different items on this, load the project. Now it says find and edit the web.config file in the CMS web folder. And then we're going to go to the app settings section and configure the DB server and host values to point to the server and name you would like to call your database without the CMS web. And then it says for DB server, if you installed a full version of SQL Server, not Express, use open paren local with the parentheses. If you installed SQL Server Express, which we did, use this /SQL Express. So I'm going to copy that since that's the one I want, and copy that. And then so we'll go back to find this web.config file. So it's at the bottom of the whole thing. So web config is right here at the bottom. So I'm going to double click that file, bring it up in the editor. It said go to app settings, and that's here at the bottom of app settings. And here's the DB server and the host that it wants me to change. And so it says right here, use local or SQL Express in the comments right there. So I'm going to highlight that local right here and paste in my SQL Express right there. And we'll leave it called Bellevue, but you can call it anything you like. It does say in the instructions that if you want to use create a database with 150 test records, just use testDB. Let's do that. TestDB is the host value on here. So we'll go back down here and say not Bellevue, but TESTDB. And now we're ready to run this thing for the first time. So click Start with IIS Express right there. And it's going to open it up in Microsoft Edge. And it's got to install some missing packages and things like that for the first time. So the first time you start it up, there are some Bower packages, some Node.js packages, and some NuGet packages that are all external libraries, are all open source external libraries that CMS Web is dependent upon, or bvcms is dependent upon, I should say. So I'm going to let that run for a period of time, and then I'll come back when that's done. So I'm going to hit pause again. All right, when you see all these builds started on the different projects, it's finished doing all the installations of the packages, but now it's actually building bvcms. And it's succeeding at all these. I don't see any error messages coming up. So CMS Web, I think, will be the last one that it needs to build in order to start up that project. Those are just warnings right there. Okay, so now it's trying to start the application, and this it's localhost : and this is just a random number that Microsoft Visual Studio chose for you, the port number. You can change that to whatever one you like, but you want a high number during debug. Otherwise, you get problems with permissions and firewall and stuff like that. These high numbers, it automatically recognizes those as being a development environment. So I'm going to hit pause while we continue to wait. Oh, and what it's doing at this point is actually building the database. So that first database is actually the basics of it is in the repository itself, in the source code. So it uses all the SQL script files from the source code to build your first database, and we called it TestDB. And TestDB is a special name for the version of the database that's in those scripts that has a bunch of test records in it, 150 some odd people records and a few organizations and other things that might find useful for at least taking, browsing around and seeing what's going on. A completely empty system is kind of boring, but we do conversions to populate people's databases with all the records from their existing system and so forth. So here we are. We're at the Fake People Church, and we're going to log in. Oh, so let me show you the instructions on that. So we got to log in to this, and that didn't take that long to do. That took a minute and a half or whatever. click the play button. We did that. First time you start up, it'll create and populate a starter database. Once in the login screen, put in these things. The default username and password for when you first start is admin and bvcms. And then it says after successfully logging in, you should set your admin password immediately because the bvcms password is a one-time use password and will no longer work after that. So admin and bvcms. So come here, admin and bvcms, sign in. No. So it now wants me to change that password. So I put in bvcms as the current password and then put in my own password right here. Oh no, all right. So you got to have at least one alphanumeric character. So bvcms and bvcms. I'm sorry, bvcms period. bvcms period. That's not enough. It says at least 7 characters, and that would be 6. So bvcms 1 2 exclamation mark. bvcms 1 2 exclamation mark. I'm just making up stuff. And this top one was bvcms, and this one is the bvcms 1 2 exclamation mark. Sorry about that. All right, password changed successfully, and here we are going back to the home screen. So now I need to use my new password from now on out, but under the people, and it looks like it's still downloading the CSS because that doesn't look quite right. But if I go to basic search, and this is the 148 records that are in here, and so we can go to any one of these people's records. You're in debug mode, so it's a little sluggish the first time you come to these pages because it has to recompile the page itself. The HTML and all the stuff in the page ends up being pre-compiled after you do that. So here's Rosemary. The pink one is deceased, and so there's Rosemary. If I go back to here, orgs, and if I do org search, we'll see some organizations and so forth. You've also got these things right here. And let me make sure we get the latest CSS here. So I'm going to refresh this page. Anyway, it works. Those things will go away. It may take a minute or two for that to get out of the cache and go from there. So, all right. So that's it. That's what the first installation of bvcms looks like. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this browser completely out, and then it's still running. So I'm going to come back and go to localhost 49819 and use my admin and bvcms 1 2 exclamation mark, sign in, and this now, all right, now it looks good. So I don't know what the problem with the CSS was, but it was still apparently caching and downloading all that CSS. So that all looks good now. So have fun.